So apparently Al Gore came at Donald Trump, if you will. Check this out.
Our Constitution, written by our founders, is intended to protect us against a threat identical to Donald Trump, someone who seeks power at all costs to get more power.
Former Vice President Al Gore came out swinging against President Trump.
Drill, baby, drill.
And his administration's push.
That was weird.
Out swinging against President Trump.
Drill, baby.
Dude, why is it just silent there? That's odd.
Drill.
And his administration's push for the use of fossil fuels Monday at the start of SF Climate Week at San Francisco's Exploratorium.
So, Al Gore is famous for being anti-climate change, trying to fix the climate change problem. He's famous for that. And people used to make fun of him. I mean, he's been talking about this since like the 2000s, like seriously. And here we are, climate change completely undeniable now. I feel Al Gore's been completely vindicated. I'm comfortable saying that now. Al Gore is fucking awesome. Like, oh my God. I didn't realize how awesome this guy was. And you know Ralph Nader? You guys may not know Ralph Nader. He ran against Al Gore and George Bush in the 2000 election or whenever it was. Nader was a third party, and he's pretty much the reason why Al Gore lost. But in the 70s or 60s, I think, maybe, Nader went on this whole, like, crusade to get seatbelts in every single car because having seatbelts wasn't a requirement. And it got to the point where the automotive industry started to, like, set him up, started to frame him for crimes and get, like, you know, claim that he was with prostitutes and everything to get him put in jail. I mean, it was wild, dude. Anyway, Ralph Nader's cool, but imagine how different the world would have been if Al Gore had won instead of George Bush. We wouldn't have ICE. ICE was created under Bush. We wouldn't have the Patriot Act where the government can just spy on you, look up whatever the f they want about you with complete impunity for quote-unquote national security purposes.
Anywhere in the world where there is an effort to pass legislation or regulations that reduces the burning of fossil fuels, they are there with their money, with their lobbyists, with their captive politicians, blocking it as best they can.
Gore, who was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007 for his work on climate change, spoke to this crowd, just like Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi and San Francisco Mayor Daniel Lurie. But it was Gore whose energy seemed to resonate.
Right now, the entire continent of Africa, fastest growing population in the world, has fewer solar panels installed than the single state of Florida in the United States.
By the way, the algorithm is hitting me hard right now, completely ignoring me. So I'd appreciate if you watch to the end of the video. Having increased watch time as a percentage and a raw number is what pushes the video further. Also check out my books, owenmorgan.com. All right, back to the video. Yeah, and why? Why? Like, what reason would there be to not have solar panels or wind turbines? I don't understand what the downside is to this shit. There is none. It's just right-wing propaganda. And you know what's really, really wild about all of this? When you're dealing with movements like this, as a movement gets larger, more attention hits it, and more people in positions of power hear about it and start doing something about it. Like, for example, say I'm unhappy with how some YouTuber is, like, taking advantage of kids or something, and I find out about it uniquely, and I talk about it and blow this up, and it gets tons and tons of attention, hundreds of thousands of views. Now people in very specific positions of power have the ability to do something about it. Like, I don't know, maybe like the chief of police of like Tucson, Arizona or something happens to hear my video because he watches, or because it was recommended on YouTube to him or something like that. And now he knows that this YouTuber, I'm just making one up. There is no YouTuber that does this in Tucson. I'm, just making shit up. Anyway, he finds out that there's this YouTuber in Tucson who's doing this shit, and he actually does something about it. He starts an investigation. Or like maybe some percentage of the audience, maybe 2% of 100,000 people start contacting the police department or the school board or whatever. When attention is directed at something, it gets people to, it gets things done. It gets people to look closely at it and figure out what could be fixed. That's grassroots activism. When things naturally grow up and build and evolve into what it is. Astroturf is when climate lobbyists who are trying to like help the oil industry, it's when they pay like 50 people to contact these organizations as though they just saw some random video. They're creating a fictitious they're creating a fictitious perception that this is a grassroots movement when it's not. And that's exactly what happened, for example, with school boards. Oh, I don't know if you guys remember, like a while back, there were school boards where Trump nutcases showing up to these school boards and yelling at the board members and saying that they were going to sue them, and parents' rights, parental rights, all this other shit. That was fake. It was all fake. It seemed like there was a real grassroots parental rights movement. There wasn't. It was astroturfed. To get that many people invested in this kind of thing, you'd have to have, hundreds of thousands paying close attention. The oil industry just pays 50 people to go around and make it seem like it's real. That's it. It's super easy to do, actually. Disturbingly easy to do, to change public perception like that. Anyway, Al Gore is aptly pointing out that that is what the oil industry is doing. They're doing this astroturfed thing where they send climate lobbyists around, oil industry lobbyists, to hire paid actors to go in and like to these school boards or to these city halls or whatever and protest as though anybody really gives a shit about any of this. And before you know it, people are paying close attention because they think it's a popular position.
Of America. That's a disgrace.
San Francisco's Climate Week includes 1,500 organizations and more than 600 events this week in the city, the largest in all of the United States.
The climate.
That's grassroots. When you get a gigantic meeting of hundreds of thousands or whatever, even international, that's grassroots.
Movement is growing right here in San Francisco.
So many of the things we were able to do in Congress came from San Francisco.
The solution is what you're doing here in Climate Week here in San Francisco. We have got to rise up and change this situation.
And how fitting to have this Climate Week welcome event here at the Exploratorium, which is self-powered.
Exploratorium, love it.
With more than 5,000 solar panels on its roof.
And that's another thing. If you want attention, if you want to make it appear as though there's this massive grassroots movement behind your belief system or whatever, you would produce a scenario where like a ton of Reddit posts are appearing and a ton of comments on Reddit posts appear in support of your position, just randomly out in the wild, and you see people on Reddit or in YouTube comments or whatever talking about this. Because that's the natural like result of like 200,000 people hearing about something. You're going to see it appear in like, Reddit and YouTube posts. But you pay 50 people to go around to all of these posts all day long, every day, for a week, and before you know it, it looks identical to a grassroots movement when it's not. Donald Trump has grassroots support that was manufactured by Fox News. That's not the same as an astroturfed movement, like the parental rights bills or like the Christian nationalist bills that are fully astroturfed. Like, if we like banned people from investing money into these things, it would evaporate overnight. There would be no movement in favor of like parental rights or whatever, because it's 100% completely and totally fictitious. On the other hand, Donald Trump's movement would continue to exist. If Fox News was banned, it would slowly fade away. But there are true believers. There are no true believers in these parental rights things, except the people that these lobbyists have convinced by hiring paid actors. That's it. One other thing about this, like these astroturfed movements also go around to YouTube channels and Reddit posts and say shit like, oh yeah, they're saving the climate by going to this event in their gigantic jet. Like, they don't care about climate change at all. First of all, I don't think most of them even use jets, private jets, to get places. Second, these jets, like Bill Gates, for example, aren't just transporting Bill Gates. They're transporting a ton of people, a ton of equipment, a ton of stuff. And third, we're working toward a world where that type of thing is not necessary, where we can use better modes of transportation, where they're more easily available, where they're higher quality. And the oil industry is doing nothing but fighting at every turn. It's just like, when you see these astroturfed comments, it's so incredibly painfully obvious. Russia is an expert in this. They've been astroturfing movements for like ever. Anyway, tell me what you think about it in the comments. These people are just colossal scumbags that are like, why are you even fighting in favor of the oil industry? Really? They don't have enough fucking money? You know, the cigarette industry did this shit too. Like, back in the 60s, they did this shit. They tried to, you know, threaten people and lie and create these astroturfed movements to give the impression that cigarettes were safe when they absolutely, obviously were not. Scumbags do this shit every time. Narikul says, I don't like Tipper Gore. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Tipper Gore either, his wife. She went on this whole kick about how bad music, you know, has swears in it and everything, and they shouldn't be allowed to release that. And she went after Eminem hard. It was ridiculous. Oh my God. That's why, like, the ESRB game rating board exists. You know, M for mature, T for teen, E for everyone. That's why CDs have explicit content on them if they have swears or whatever. That was a grassroots movement that was really fucking stupid. Like, they were convinced that they were going to create murderers out of kids who listened to Eminem or played, like, I don't know what game, like Wolfenstein 3D or whatever. Just, God, people, get help, really. This is an indication that people are just obsessed over stupid shit. But the climate stuff that we're talking about here is an indication that the oil industry is paying lobbyists well. That's it. Yeah, tell me your thoughts.